Good afternoon, President, fellow Rotarians, guests, and our speaker today, Mr. Imtiaz Muqbil. I'm so honored to be introducing you because I was in the PR advertising business, and invitations, were sent out to you. So and so a lot of people in the PR advertising business know you. You're not new to them at all. I'm so honored. So before we start this interesting speech, I would like to brief all of you on his experience, personal and professional experience. Mr. Muqbil is the Asia Pacific region's leading travel trade journalist, cum historian. Winner of a Pata Travel Journalism Award in 2005 for coverage of the December 2004 tsunami disaster. Mr. Muqbil began covering the Thai travel and tourism industry in 1981. Author of two books on 1987, Visit Thailand Here, he wrote a popular column called Travel Monitor in the Bangkok Post between July 1992 to July 2012. I'm sure there are more, to your professional background because you've been in the business for so long. I'm sure people can Google you, But we are looking forward to hearing more what you have to say on the very interesting topic that draw a lot of members and guests here today. The topic is the rise and fall of Thailand, the greatest story in global tourism history. So please help me welcome Mr. Imtiaz Muqbil. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Kapkan Sutathani. Good afternoon, Sawadee Kap, ladies and gentlemen, Rotarians and Rotary ants, I believe they're called the ladies. This is my fifth talk at the Rotary Club of Bangkapi, and the second time I have actually been called in to step in when the main speaker was unable to make it. I'm really truly glad to see this because I actually encourage it. Because if any of you ever have a speaker dropping out at the last minute, please feel free to call me. I'm also trying to diversify my topic base. Last week, my wife and I celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary. So my next favorite topic is 11 secrets of a successful marriage. So if anyone wants to talk on that at any time, please feel free to give me a call. Anyhow, today my topic is the future of tourism. So let me start by saying that it is time for us here in Thailand to face some hard and bitter truths. Now, truth is the first of the Rotary slogans. Is it the truth? That's what your four main slogans are. And it is also the fundamental philosophy of Buddhism, which goes by the name of the Four Noble Truths. So there is a certain correlation, a very strong correlation between what the truth that the Rotary Club aspires to and the fundamental philosophies of Buddhism, which revolves entirely around the Four Noble Truths. Now, what are the Four Noble Truths? Well, basically, they are all about explaining the certainty and the cause of suffering. And what is happening in Thailand and pretty much around the world today is that there is a lot of suffering going on. And perhaps what we need to do is to adopt some of the philosophies of both the Rotary Club as well as Buddhism in examining the truth of what is going on, what is the cause of it, and then look for the same philosophies when we begin the search for solutions. So that is sort of gives you some kind of a context as to where I'm coming from and what are some of the new ideas that I'm going to be presenting to you today. Now, I also claim to be the Asia Pacific region's leading travel and tourism historian. Now, people ask me, on what grounds do you make that claim? Well, very simple. This year, I have been covering the Thai and the ASEAN and the Asia Pacific travel and tourism industry for exactly 40 years. I began working for a newspaper called Travel Trade Gazette Asia in 1981 in Bangkok. And I have been watching this industry, this wonderful industry, grow and go through numerous ups and downs over the last 40 years. Now, what I did in my career as a journalist was when I used to write and collect my news at that time, in journalistic term, it was known as a story. And a story, of course, revolved around the fact that the event that you were reporting on was designed around a great headline. So over the years, I reported many stories of all kinds of developments in the travel and tourism industry, ups and downs, successes and failures, all kinds of stuff. And what I have done meticulously over the last 40 years now is to compile all those stories into what has now become a HiSTOry. And I can claim with absolute certainty that there's probably nobody in the Asia Pacific who has got that vast amalgamation of great stories and events over the last 40 years in what is now becoming a study of certainly what is the greatest story in global tourism history. Now, it also reflects my passion for history. I can tell you that as a student, I failed any subject to do with science and mathematics. But I was an A-grade history student. And history falls into a category known as humanities, which includes geography, language, literature, and the arts, culture. All these three are at the core of the tourism industry, not just in Thailand, but anywhere today. So, why then do I call Thailand the greatest story in global travel and tourism history? Now, if one studies the last year was supposed to mark the 60th anniversary of both the Tourism Authority of Thailand and Thai Airways International. Now, I'm proud to have covered both those institutions for the last 40 of their 60 years in existence. And I can tell you that Thailand is really a perfect match of all the great successes and all the great failures that any travel and tourism industry particularly can expect anywhere. Not just within Asia and the ASEAN region, but I think globally. There is probably no other country in the world that has mounted great marketing campaigns like we have, that has come up with an amazing amalgamation of products and services, great brand building campaigns, exploited our competitive advantages, opened up new destinations, focused on the demographic and technological changes, capitalized on all the various strengths and opportunities, while at the same time trying very, very hard to plug our weaknesses and deal with some of the threats. When you look at this, the way we have grown over the last 40, 60 years, it's quite amazing. And if you can compare it to any other country around the world anywhere, and I assure you, you will not find any other country in the world which has been through as many ups and downs as we have. Now, in 2019, just before the COVID crisis struck, we were fortunate to get 40 million tourists. Now, this, in spite of the fact that if you again look back at the history of the industry, Thai travel and tourism has basically been hit by just about every crisis known to mankind. Starting from the 1980s when we suffered the AIDS pandemic, and then moving all through the years, moving fast forward to 1997 with the economic crisis. Then we had the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Then we had the Eurozone crisis. Then we had the global economic crisis. Then we had the tsunami. Then we had SARS, bird flu, you name it. We have had military coups, political protests, shut down our airport for 10 days. Then after that, they shut down the central business district for another goodness knows how many weeks. Literally every crisis known to mankind that we have been struck by. And in spite of that, in 2019, we still managed to lead this part of the world with 40 million tourists. Now, clearly, we must be doing something right. Yes, we all have all kinds of stuff that has gone wrong, but we have also done many things right. And the fact that we have actually been able to create an industry with 40 million tourists and the amount of jobs that created and the amount of GDP and the gross national economic product, right through the system. It wasn't just concentrated in one or two areas, but it was nationwide. The economic, social, cultural impact of that has been quite phenomenal. And this has actually been the result of some great campaigns, great crisis management strategies, all kinds of things that we have done to actually get this tourism industry moving and capitalizing on all the opportunities. I have got a huge number of stories to tell you, but today I think what I would like to do is just to tell you one that many people don't really recount very much. Many of you all have been in Thailand for many, many years. All of you all know about the Oriental Hotel. Now, the Oriental Hotel for many years was the general manager of that hotel was a man named Kurt Wachtweitel. He was Austrian-German, mixed, born here, national of the other. But he was the longest serving general manager of any hotel in Asia. For more than 30 years, he was the general manager of this great institution known as the Oriental. Now, we all talk today about promoting quality tourists. The Oriental Hotel was at the forefront of bringing the world's rich and famous, they played host to actors, presidents, kings, princesses, all over the place. And this man was basically the brand image of that hotel. Many of you knew him personally, I know that for sure, and probably knew him much better than I did. But this man was an icon in the world of travel and tourism, not just in Thailand, but certainly all over the world. What is not known is behind this gentleman was two great ladies known personally to me, Kun Ponsari and Kun Ankana. These were the people who actually delivered on all the promises of delivering great service to people who came there and visited. Whether people wanted to take a tour, whether these presidents and chairmen of the board and queens and prince and royalty, whoever, anybody who stayed at the Oriental Hotel, whether they wanted to go on a river cruise, whether they wanted to get a haircut, or their shoes shone, or a massage, these two ladies were there to make sure that that promise was delivered on. And they did it consistently and persistently for decades. I'm very happy that all three of them are very much around today, and long may they be blessed with a good and happy and healthy life. But these are the kind of unsung heroes that nobody in the travel and tourism industry today pays any attention to. These people were at the core of our travel and tourism industry, and just one of the great stories that made Thailand into what I justifiably call the greatest story in travel and tourism history. There was no other hotel like the Oriental Hotel anywhere, probably I would say in the world at that time. There was no general manager who has served for so much as long as Kurt Wachtweitel, and he was not supported, and there were no two other ladies who delivered on their promises of pure ultimate kindness as Kun Ponsari and Kun Ankana. If anybody is recording this, please refer this to them, because I'm sure they would be delighted to be known and recognized. I remember, because these are all part of the history of this great country and built this industry. And today, unfortunately, nobody seems to pay any attention to them, because it's today, at the young generation, all they're interested is in bean counting. TripAdvisor, Google, Facebook, how much you can get more. That was pre-COVID, of course. Things have changed a little bit. But that was the whole thing. How to get more growth, how to get more numbers, how to get more stats. Well, it might be useful to go back and see how we were actually able to generate the people who were behind all those great policies and promotions that put Thailand and the travel and tourism industry pretty much on the map. Now, that's just one story. I could tell you 100 more stories, because that is part of my brief today. To try and get Thailand, its young generation, in the new era, to learn the lessons of history, avoid the mistakes of the past, and benefit from our huge successes, as well as avoid repeating the mistakes of our failures. That is going to become the order of the day as we go forward. Let me end with just a few small lessons. Again, I go back to the word truth. Truth, again, is it the truth? Exactly as the Rotary Club slogan says, and related to Buddhism's 4 Noble Truths. I will come up with maybe 2 truths before I give you a few conclusions about what I see happening in the post-COVID era. Truth number one of the problems that we have in Thailand is that we have great difficulty learning from the lessons of history. Again, going back to the 1997 crisis, everybody thought that was one of the worst economic crises that that hit this part of the world. Unfortunately, it began in Thailand. We spent 5 years repaying the loans from the IMF to recover from that huge crisis. What did we learn from it? One of the biggest problems that crisis occurred is because this country suddenly landed up in a huge amount of debt, which we could not pay back. And when you land up in that kind of economic debt, you are basically just asking to be punished. And that's exactly what happened. And over the years, if you look at it and ask yourself, have we learned from from that lesson? I would think not. Many of those that debt was created by the fact that there was this huge real estate building boom. And as soon as the 97 economic crisis ended, well, it was back to the same old thing. The buildings started coming up again. People have short memory. That's okay. We are back to being an Asian tiger again, and off we go. Well, now we are in another kind of, not only are we in health trouble, but we're also going to be in a bit of financial trouble for the next few years as we begin to pay for the costs of recovering from this crisis. But over the last 20 years, have we actually built a stronger economy based on lowering our level of debt? I'm really not sure. I think we could have done a lot better, but our fundamentals, even though they were strong, most of our policy prescriptions for economic development just went back to the same old way. Same thing, you can do it with the tsunami. After the tsunami hit, everybody said, wow, we are going to rebuild that whole South Thailand back better. Did we actually rebuild it back better? I don't think so. I think it went back to pretty much the same old way. Maybe in a few places they might have learned their lesson, but by and large, all those beaches and everything else just went back to the same old way of doing it. So that's the first truth. We have a lot of difficulty learning from the mistakes of history, and that is one of the things that we need to fix going forward. The second most important truth is that as we look ahead, our most important travel and tourism competitive advantage is no longer here. Now, people ask me, what do you mean by competitive advantage of Thailand? And in the traditional way of looking at things, the competitive advantage of Thailand is considered to be, our friendly service, our great people, our hospitable nature, our wonderful beaches, our great hotels, our great spas, our great cooking schools, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm saying total bullshit. None of that is true. Our greatest competitive advantage was His Majesty the King Rama the Ninth, the Great. It was because of him that people had this awe, largely, that people came to Thailand to see this monarch that everybody absolutely loved, who was the founder of great philosophy like the sufficiency economy. It was because of His Majesty Rama the Ninth, the Great, that we had two of the greatest tourism campaigns in tourism history. One is Visit Thailand year 1987, and the other one was when we marked the first one, Visit Thailand year 1987, when we marked the 60th, the auspicious 5th cycle of His Majesty, and the second one was exactly 12 years later, when we marked the 72nd, 6th cycle of His Majesty, with another great campaign called the Amazing Thailand campaign in 1998-1999. So first 1987 with the 60th anniversary, and then 12 years later with Amazing Thailand, two of the greatest campaigns in travel and tourism history, all because of the august presence of His Majesty Rama the Ninth the Great. That era has now ended, and in that competitive advantage today, unfortunately, is no longer there. And that is something that we are going to have to deal with as we go forward in the new era of travel and tourism in the years to come. Now, in conclusion, people ask me, when will business return? And I'm saying, well, as far as I can see, not for the foreseeable future. My impression is that today, not just Thailand, not just ASEAN, but the whole world is actually entering a prolonged period of uncertainty, instability, and insecurity. The health pandemic is just one of a whole bunch of other changes that are taking place all around the world. Technological changes, demographic changes, geopolitical power struggles, economic changes, all kinds of stuff. And there is an enormous uncertainty about how these are all going to pan out. You're already seeing backlash beginning to set in over the future of democracy, the future of human rights, the future of the sustainable development goals. Many of these things are changing. In the old days, when each crisis hit, you could actually see a light at the end of the tunnel, because each crisis was finite. Whether it was a tsunami or an economic crisis or a local domestic political crisis, you could see there was a light at the end of the tunnel. With this one, you have no idea how long this pandemic is going to last, how many more waves are going to come on, how many more different variations of this virus are going to hit, whether those vaccines are going to work or not, who actually knows? On top of the huge economic costs of dealing with the short-term impact of this virus, we also have to deal with the long-term financial impact of paying for the rebuilding of economies and jobs and everything else. So there is an enormous amount of uncertainty as to when things are going to come back. And people can tell you 3 years, 4 years. I will tell you that's all guesswork. Nobody actually knows how long it's going to last. All I can tell you that we are in for a long, long period of uncertainty, instability, and insecurity. And none of those are actually good for travel and tourism or any other aspect of the business. Now, I was going to end this on a very positive note. One thing for sure, I don't know when the better days are going to come. But sooner or later, they will come. And one of the things that we need to do now in Thailand, as we look forward to the new era, the new not just for the country, but for the whole region, for the Greater Mekong region, for ASEAN, and even the Asia Pacific at large. I personally believe that travel and tourism can be a very important part of the solution, a very, very important part of the solution. And Thailand can actually pave the way for a better future. We, in my opinion, in the past, we have been a marketing genius, but a management dunce. And that is what we need to fix going forward. We have done a great job with marketing in the past, and we can actually repeat that, but at the same time, learn from the mistakes and create a better management agenda as well. Now you hear everybody talking about rebuild, reset, restructure, redesign, re-this, re-that. I've got two completely different re's on that. One is we need to rewind the clock and rewire the system. Rewind the clock and rewire the system. And the whole new system that needs to be built needs to focus on the short term, medium term, and the long term. Today, as like it has been the case in the past, everything is focused pretty much on short term, immediate. Yes, you need to bring the jobs back. You need to bring the tourists back. And many, many things can be done and are being done to make that happen. Because certainly, if a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, we all have to be sure that the first step actually, and the second step and the third step are actually on firm footing, and you don't land up tripping and falling on your face at this early stage in the game. So we need to look at both the immediate as well as the medium term as well as the long term. So we need to rewind the clock and rewire the system. And I'm now writing a book on the Thai, Asia Pacific, and the ASEAN tourism industry. And my three prescriptions, the formula prescriptions, are very much local, regional, as well as global. The local solution is very simple. We have to turn around and build a whole new travel and tourism industry based on the sufficiency economy. That was the most sustainable system known to mankind. And it is perfectly applicable in this day and age to not just to the Thai travel and tourism industry, but of course for the country at large. In the past, we have tended, I believe, basically to pay lip service to this great philosophy. And I think we need to find ways of mainstreaming that and use the travel and tourism industry as a very focused competitive advantage as we go forward. The second one is regional. Regional, why? Because we have this ASEAN slogan called one vision, one community, one identity, or perhaps not necessarily in that order. One vision, one identity, one community. Well, we are all basically as good as our neighborhood. If our neighborhood is burning down, we are certainly going to end up being affected. And we can see what has happened with the COVID business. Many of the problems, even though we got it under control, we now landed up getting another new wave because they were not able to bring it under control in a neighboring country, and of course the people from there flooded over into our country, and suddenly we landed up getting a new wave. So what happens in our neighboring countries also lands up affecting us sooner or later. So whether it's whether if there's a flooding problem in another part of ASEAN, or whether there's a haze and they're burning something down in Indonesia, we all land up getting affected. And that's the way it is. There are no, nature respects no borders. And when things happen in another country, we land up getting affected as well. So we need to find ways of making again this one vision, one identity, one community concept, make it a very strong part of the way we develop our industry going forward. And the final, my final part of the solution is that if you take the sufficiency economy and the one ASEAN and the ASEAN one vision, one identity, one community philosophy, both these are actually linked very, very strongly with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Again, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, well, they started in 2014. Before that, they were known as the Millennium Development Goals. They were supposed to be marked the first 15 years of this century. Again, they collapsed because there were too many crises, wars, all kinds of stuff. Now we are looking at the second stage, and of course the Sustainable Development Goals are now also pretty much set for, I don't know, I mean, they're not going to work out very well because the whole parameters and the paradigms have changed. They were supposed to be designed for poverty alleviation. Well, now suddenly, the COVID crisis has plunged more people back into poverty than we could have imagined. However, the philosophy as a whole remains strong. And travel and tourism industry, and again, a very unique selling proposition of this industry, is that travel and tourism is the only industry in the world that can be applicable to the UN, all 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Everything from poverty alleviation to cultural preservation to environmental upkeep, to the arts, to the music, to job creation, you name it. Travel and tourism can actually meet all those sustainable development goals. So that's where I'm coming from on this. And I personally, I cannot predict when this thing will over, when this COVID crisis will be over, but I am sure it will eventually be over. And that's the time we have to start planning for, but planning in a way that is in a completely, the paradigm shift from the old way we have been planning our industry. Yes, we need to look at short-term recovery campaigns, but at the same time, we need to look back, rewind the clock, rewire the system, learn the lessons of history, take advantage of our phenomenal successes, and at the same time, steer completely clear of all the mistakes that we have made in the past. So that's my 20 minutes worth. I will be, once more, thank you very much, Indri, Kun Sukanya, for the invitation. I'm happy to have stepped in at the last minute. I will be more than happy to answer a few questions. Thank you very
much. So, are there any questions from the floor first?
Yes, I have a question.
Imtiaz, please.
Yes, if I understand correctly, the speaker mentioned about the two. The two is considered two elements: the service and about our King Rama the Nile. That is the two, if I understand correctly. But let's put it like, I'm not sure, but a true, like it's like a critical success factor for Thailand. These two success factors. And also, the speaker mentioned about the solution. The solution is, number one, is the sufficient economy approach. Second, is leverage the ASEAN as a whole, position Thailand as a unique position in the ASEAN perspective. Then I see the problem and solution doesn't quite match. My question actually go back to the first one, the tool, the service, and also the king. What can we do about that? Because we have a new king now. So, what can we do to solve the problem of service and a king?
The sufficiency economy philosophy is very much alive and valid today. That era remains onward, more relevant today than ever before. We just need to bring it back. We just need to find ways of mainstreaming it. In the past, the problem was the sufficiency economy was always something seen as on the fringe. The mainstream economic development philosophy of the country was all basically designed around gross national product, gross domestic product, jobs, economic growth, etc., etc. I'm saying that may not be applicable with the same kind of degree in the future. And one actually looks at the sustainability, the long-term sustainability of the sufficiency economy, which was very strongly rooted in the concept of Buddhist economics, is actually going to be much more relevant towards the long-term solution of Thailand as a whole than ever before. So when I say rewind the clock and rewire the system, I think we need to look at alternative perspectives. It's like when you go to a doctor and you find that you go to one doctor and you find that the medication and the prescriptions being given to you by that one doctor isn't quite working, you say, I need a second opinion. And I think the time for Thailand today is to ask for a second opinion.
Very much. Any more questions, please?
Yes, please. Imtiaz, thank you very much for the speech. My question that for the future, we should plan having high-paying tourists instead of 40 million who put pressure on the environment and on the resources of the country. I think, how can that be done?
Sorry, who was that question from? I didn't see that.
Vinay from Rotary Club of Bangkok.
Yes. Yes, sorry. Yes, sorry, you a high-paying tourist? Is that?
We should aim for high-paying tourists rather than 40 million who put pressure on the environment and on the resources of the country.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Let's face it, our travel and tourism industry is not going to survive on just bringing in people on private jets who fly first class. No airline survives only on first class business. You need an economy class to meet your bread and butter.
Yes, but there should be also economy class as well.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. And when I cited the example of the Oriental Hotel, that's what the Oriental Hotel was known for, bringing in high-paying tourists. But we had one great hotel, but at the same time, we had thousands of guest houses, lodges. Those are not high-paying tourists. Those are people who eat at the local noodle shops. They are the ones who buy the local souvenirs. They are the ones who use local transportation. They are the ones who provide money for the taxi drivers, not the high-paying tourists. The high-paying tourists will go around in their limos and luxury cars, etc., etc. But the real money, the bread and butter, will always come from those who are low-paying tourists. And frankly, I object strongly to tourists being divided into quality and non-quality. I mean, everybody who comes to this country everybody who comes to this country is a guest. And as long as they're not bringing in diseases or anything that is detrimental to our culture and our society, I think basically deserves to be treated as a guest. The amount of money they pay, I don't think should be a criteria or a category for classifying as to how you're going to promote them coming into the country in future.
But I have different ideas. Okay.
No, that's fine. I welcome democratic debate. Believe me, I'm all in favor of it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think if there are any questions, maybe after the meeting, but as it's 1:30, I would like to ask to PP Sochitra to give the word of thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, President. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to say that to Mr. Imtiaz Muqbil that actually you're not a replacement. It's because we didn't have a speaker because of the situation, and so thank you very much for agreeing to come and talk to us.
Thank you for the correction.
It was a very interesting talk and a lot of information included in the talk. And I like the part that you compare the situation of travel and tourist industry in Thailand and the truth that we have to identify, and find a cure with the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. And in fact, your speech was quite enlightening, although not in the good, not the good as enlightenment. And we know what happened, and we know how you saw the whole situation because of your experiences here in the industry. And I think your recommendations are very valid. The fact that we do have to rethink of the strategy that we have been taking because the situation today is not the same as even a few years ago in regards to our travel industry. And I hope that when your book comes out, all these recommendations will be studied and appreciated by our industries. And so we hope to hear more from you. Once your book is out, maybe you'll be even more interesting. So let us. So I invite my colleagues who are now watching to express the thanks of Rotary Club of Bangkapi and everybody who is here to you, Mr. Muqbil, and thank you very much for a very good speech.
Thank you, Kap. Thank you. Pleasure. Kap, sorry, Kap.